Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Post-Military Podcast, where we share stories of veterans' transition out of the military and their advice to other service members based on their life experience. Whether you are still in service, a veteran, or just someone preparing to transition into a new chapter of your life, there is something here for you to learn. I've included timestamps in the description of the episode, so head down there to see if there are any topics that are of particular interest to you. Also, while you're poking around, subscribing to the channel or podcast on your favorite platform is always greatly appreciated. Anyway, thank you so much for being here today, and I hope you enjoy the episode.
Solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear
That I will support and defend.
that I will support and defend
The Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Post-Military Podcast, the podcast where we give you stories and advice on how to transition to the next chapter of your life, specifically for those that are leaving the military and moving into the civilian world. With me today, someone I'm very excited to have on. He was graduated from one of the greatest schools in the nation, the United States Air Force Academy. He then went into the United States Air Force and served in the Medical Service Corps, which is a really cool field that not a lot of people know about. He has since transitioned out of the military, where he runs his own financial planning business and has his own podcast as well, which I highly recommend you check out. It will be tagged down in the description below, along with any other links you can find him. His name's Eric Baskins. And Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to come on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Billy. I'm glad we're able to get together and do this. Been looking forward to it. It's been too long. It's been a few months since you originally, reached out to me. So happy we finally got it. It took a whole nother calendar year. 2023.
I know, right? Yeah, seriously. Yeah, we were like, let's do it this year, and then we did it a different year. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time seriously. So I want to start from the beginning. Yeah. Tell everybody about your time in the military, and then what ended it. Like, how did you end up deciding that it was time to transition out of the military?
Yeah, for sure. So went to the Air Force Academy, as you said. I got recruited to play hockey there. That's kind of how I ended up there. Didn't grow up in a military family at all. So I ended up there not really knowing what the military is all about, just wanting to go to a good school. And it ended up being just a great fit for me, academically, athletically, certainly. And I actually enjoyed the structure of the military as well. But, junior year or so, I was an economics major, always wanted to do something businessy, something like acquisitions, finance. Those were kind of the typical career fields for, they sent out some email. The health services session folks at the academy said, there's this thing called Medical Service Corps, which is hospital administration in the Air Force. And, it's for business. We want economics majors. We want management majors. You'd be running the support side of hospitals and clinics. And I was like, I actually grew up kind of wanting to be a doctor, and now I kind of want to get into business. So this is kind of a sweet intersection. And the way the jobs worked too, you could select it's what's called a boarded. It's a non-line AFSC, right? So you have to apply to it just like you would to go to med school. And then if you get picked up, there was, I think, 5 slots my year. They take you out of that kind of gauntlet. I'll call it the rack and stack 1 through 6. And hopefully you don't get missiles or whatever. That's like the big thing at the academy. No one wants missiles. My brother-in-law is a missileer and he loves it. So yeah, he chose it, but whole different story. But anyways, it took me out of that and just guaranteed that I got a good job that I wanted. So I was like, I'm all in. And I think 13 of us applied and 5 of us got it. It's still, like you said, super little known career field. I think it's a little bit more well-known now. I've actually helped like several people get into it, not only from the academy, but other career fields like career changers that don't like what they're doing. I've just kind of helped them out with the application process, talk them through it. So no, I graduated, went up to Cheyenne, Wyoming to my girlfriend, now wife, girlfriend at the time, was training to try to make the Olympic team for the high jump in Colorado Springs in the world class athlete program for 3 years. So she was in the Springs. I wanted to be close by. That's why I selected Cheyenne. Most people wouldn't pick to be there, but I actually enjoyed it. So did 4 years there, got a PCS, a joint spouse finally when she got out of Intel school to be in Dayton together here, and then just transitioned out of the military at about 5 years and 4 months after graduation. So rewinding the clock, I guess, back to how I got to this transition point, rewinding the the clock back, I was like reading a ton of books. I started like in 2017, maybe junior year of college, started reading tons and tons of self-help books. I see you got a bunch of books behind you. We have a whole shelf out there, entrepreneurship books, like all kinds of stuff. And really just did like a lot of soul searching and figured out like, I think business ownership was like the only path for me to live the life that I ultimately wanted to live someday with wife and kids, and living where I want, not having to punch a clock and be subservient to an employer. That was just like, that whole idea really resonated with me. And there was one book in particular called The $100 Startup by Chris Gillibo. I'm totally butchering his name. He's written a couple entrepreneurship books, but he said something like you want to find something you're interested in, like you're passionate about, right? Something that people naturally come to you for, and then something you can get paid for. Like, what's the intersection of those three things? And for me, that was like a light bulb moment. Personal finance, investing, that's kind of always been my thing for a really long time. When it comes to teammates, friends, I was kind of always like the go-to guy for that. So went down early 2019 doing all this research, figuring out what it means to be a registered investment advisor, the difference between a Series 65 and the other licenses, the certified financial planner designation, and just started doing coursework to pass that Series 65 in summer 2019 to become a registered investment advisor and be able to charge for investment advice. And then on to taking the CFP coursework into 2020 and passing that in late 2020. I did my MBA at the same time too, from Nebraska online. Don't ask me why. we can have a whole conversation about the MBA, about the MBA. Do I get an MBA or not? I don't know that I'd do it again. I do have one. The program was great, but I don't know. I don't know if getting an MBA really is worth it for everyone. But so did that, passed the CFP, finally launched my firm in 2021, April of 2021, officially registered with the state of Wyoming, and began taking on clients. It's very slow. It's a slow business early on, but was, built it up steadily to the point. I think the transition point for me was always going to be in this range, this 5-ish year range. My wife does have a commitment through 2025. So from an income perspective, like I was always from the mindset that I didn't need this business to provide income for our family. So I want to get out and put my full focus on it. So for me, it was never really a side gig. It was always the plan, which I think helped my focus and my growth. But yeah, just transitioned out in October of 2023 officially, and now I'm doing it full time and just loving it. It's been awesome so far, and it's definitely what I'm supposed to be doing.
That's awesome. Congratulations. I'm glad you're enjoying the first steps that you're taking for your transition. The first thing that I want to ask you, and there's a lot of things that I want to ask you based off of what you said so far, is you said you started reading self-help books and like doing all of that soul searching in like 2019, correct? Was that the time period?
Yeah, 2018, kind of right after graduation. We graduated May of 2018, so like into 2019, that first kind of year of like, ooh, I'm sitting in my apartment alone at 4:30 every day. What do I do?
I gotcha. And what inspired that search for what do I want to be when I grow up so early in your military career? Because I think for a lot of folks, they get out of college or they enlist and then you're just kind of in the military, and then that becomes like your whole thing. And it's really hard to go, okay, what's next? Like what is my life post-military look like? And so for you, what do you think inspired that soul searching? Because you could have just watched Netflix at 4:30 every single day or done something else. So what inspired you to do this thing?
Yeah, great question, actually. So two things I'd say. One, the pace and the rigor of my schedule at the Air Force Academy with class, like some military obligations, some class, a little bit of homework, go down to practice, come up, dinner, more homework, spend some time with my girlfriend, bed, like over and over and over again for 4 years. Like it's 6:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. Like I'm always doing something productive. So I guess going into the job now, and our clinic up at FE Warren was open from 7:30 to 4:30, and I come home at 4:35, and now I can watch Netflix or I can do whatever I want. So like I needed to continue that pace. I think the academy drove that into me. And then I guess the second part of that is like, I don't know. There's something in me, like when I looked around, when I went to work, I worked with everyone's, in the military, you work with some very, very smart, driven people and some people that are kind of just checking the box. I just feel like I was really frustrated, to be honest, looking around and seeing people that were checking the box and then kind of looking at the military compensation structure and the progression of rank. And I'm doing the math and I'm like, wait a second, I can be the best MSC in the country and I'll make O6. And if I'm the worst, I'll make O5. Like like we're talking that's how tight it is of the dispersion of outcomes. So I was a little bit frustrated by that, and then just looking forward into like the life that I want. Right, my girlfriend at the time, like I knew we were gonna get married as long as she said yes, and then thinking about like the life we wanted someday of like raising a family and me always being able to be there, be coaching the kids' baseball games, like whatever it is. Just thinking forward for all of that of what I wanted, what I knew I wanted in like 10 years. I didn't think that us both being in the military necessarily was the best, input for that output. I thought, if I'm able to figure out what I'm super passionate about, what people will pay me for, and what I can build as a business, I'm able to deliver that outcome that I want with certainty. I know that I can build an income in a business to this level where we can live, where we want. I don't necessarily have to work a certain number of hours per week. I don't have to put in anything into Leave Web to go on leave, all those things. And so that's that. All of that together kind of led me down this introspection, doing a lot of reading, figuring out. I had a OneNote. I still have it of like 20 business ideas. Financial planning actually wasn't even on there. I started that probably when I was back at the academy. Like there's all kinds of stuff on there. Maybe I'll mine that list someday when I get bored, if I get bored with financial planning. But no. So that's kind of, I guess, how I got to this. I have to start a business point, and then just doing a lot of searching of like, what is that for me? For me, it's personal finance. That was pretty clear after reading all these books and just doing some thinking, spending some time in thought, kind of alone in that Cheyenne, Wyoming apartment.
When you talk about narrowing down the business, like identifying the business ownership and then eventually getting to certified financial planning, you mentioned things that exist outside of your job, like the life that you want to live, the time that you want to spend with your family, not wanting to be accountable to anybody else, like all of these things. And what do you think got you thinking at that holistic level? Because again, I think that a lot of people, when they're thinking about getting out, they just want a job. And so then they make a job decision without taking into account the rest of their life. The example that I always like to use is when people go, I'm a pilot, I don't want to be in the Air Force anymore because my job takes me away from my family too much. But then they get out and then they go fly for Delta, and then they're gone all the time because they're flying for Delta. And so it's like, it's not a holistic decision. It's just like, for some reason, I don't want to be in the military, and then I'm just going to get a job. And so what do you think got you thinking big picture versus just like, what job do I want to be versus not want to be?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That's a really deep and good question. I want to say a little bit of maturity. I guess so like upon graduation, I'm a couple years older than your typical college graduate. Played junior hockey for 2 years. So I'm 24, 25 in that first job. I'm not 21, 22. And then I would just say it's the way that I'm wired. I've got a really good relationship with my family. I always have, just not only my parents and sister, but like my cousins and aunts, uncles. Like I don't know. Family's always been super important, as it has been for my wife, and we have a great relationship with her family. So like, just looking at like all of that, I've never been. I don't know. I wouldn't say I've never been career focused. I'm definitely driven, but I just like doing introspection again, like getting quiet and focusing on what do I value, and that's time with family. Not necessarily. I don't need to be on the cover of a magazine. Like that to me, I don't know, that just the way that I'm wired, thinking about that's what drives me to want business ownership, not necessarily being a 2-star general or being, S&P 500 company, executive. Like that stuff is not that interesting to me. Being able to spend time with my wife right now, my future kids, doing what I want with them, always being, the baseball coach, the hockey coach, whatever it is. That's I don't know. You couldn't put a value on that for me. And I just like, again, comparing it just in a military context, the grinding that we all know you need to put in to edge out the other people for the wing strats, and staying after work and writing the OPRs, like, so that you maybe make 06 or maybe put on a star, whatever that is, like for some recognition and then some income. But what are you giving up for that in the interim? And to me, that trade-off's just not worth it, where I can go do what I love, get paid really well for it, and then have, most importantly, the time to spend with family.
That's awesome.
I don't know if that answers it, but short answer is, yeah, that's just the way that I was raised and wired. I don't know. I wish I had a better answer.
No, I don't think that there's a good answer or a bad answer, to be quite honest with you. I think that it's just, I think that all insight is good. And I just really just want to highlight for all of the listeners out there, like, what your perspective, I believe, is valuable, because when people get out of the military, there's such a shift in everything that people tend to pick a bad job because they're not making that holistic consideration anymore. And that's why I think you see a lot of veterans leave their job within the first year, because they go, this isn't it. Like, this is, and they don't know why it isn't it, because they haven't taken the time to actually think through like that holistic perspective that you're thinking through. So I just wanted to highlight that, because I think that that's really good. So the next piece that I want to talk about in terms of your like transition journey for getting out, let's dive into the MBA. Why? Tell me about it. I've had this MBA conversation with a couple of different people now, and
Okay.
I have my own thoughts on it. I would love to hear what your big takeaways were after completing it.
Yeah. So for me, like, why did I get an MBA? Again, something I was thinking about at the academy, economics major, like kind of the natural follow on if you're business oriented is that MBA. So I was researching at the academy, I had a spreadsheet of like all the online schools or hybrid schools that I could maybe do maybe later on with the GI Bill or pipeline, or just do on tuition assistance, which is what I ended up using. And I guess, like, for me personally, what drove me to even think MBA, like, again, it's ingrained in me. My dad has one. Like, he went to Kellogg Northwestern back in the day, and that's definitely helped his career out. And people still, he definitely doesn't flaunt it, never talks about it, but people still to this day, are like, they're taken aback a little bit when he says, or when they find out he went to Kellogg, because it's a top school. But so I always figured I'd get an MBA, like, I just thought it was in the cards for me. And there's a lot of pressure, I think, on young CGOs also to like professional development, right? You get your MBA, like that's what you do. So I ended up going with Nebraska. I thought it was like, it wasn't the cheapest program out there. It wasn't the most expensive. It was fully virtual. It was rated really well, and had a great experience through it. Like, wasn't all that difficult. I do think that education wise, it was a lot of like repeat for me as an economics major, like managerial accounting, financial accounting, like legitimately the same textbook that I had at the academy that I just took. So there was definitely some repetition. I'm not going to say I didn't learn a few things. I think it was a better use of my time than watching Netflix, just being in my apartment alone again. And then like the situation that I was in my apartment in Cheyenne alone, I don't know that I would have done my MBA if I had a wife and kids at the time. Right. So like, I have all this time where I can do something productive or watch Netflix. So I was like, well, let's do this MBA thing. Why not? So I don't know. For me, it was also like a hedging strategy. Like, if this financial planning thing didn't work out, I was just starting that road. I do have that MBA in my back pocket where I can stay in, maybe get out, go into healthcare administration. Like, it is valuable. I'm not going to say it's not. So yeah, that was my path to deciding to take the MBA, doing the MBA. And then now it's like, I'm not going to say, it obviously adds maybe a little bit of credibility for what I'm doing. It certainly doesn't hurt having an MBA in finance, especially in my business. But I just don't know for like the average person if like that's the answer. I don't know. I think there's a balance. Like, if you can get it done, especially if you're going to go into debt to do it or something, it's like, I don't know. If you're going to give up salary for 2 years to go do it, I don't know. It could be worth it. It could not. I think it depends on a ton of factors. I think guys that are getting, going with the GI Bill to like Harvard and stuff, that's a totally different story. I think obviously that's probably worth it, but like, I just think, I don't know that everyone should be defaulting into like, oh, let's just do the grad degree. Let's knock it out. I think there should just be like a little bit more thought behind it. Like, why do you need that? Do you need that? Is there something like that would be actually more advantageous for you to get? Like if you're in cyber, MBA is probably not all that important compared to some of the cyber certs you could go chase. Like, so I would caution folks to just think about it a little bit. I always joke with people, like I have an MBA and like, it's like right there on the wall. And that's about what it's been worth for me. Cause like, I didn't get out and get a job. I think it would have been different if you get out and go work for Amazon or something, right? I think an MBA maybe puts you at a different level. I don't know how the compensation structure works, but yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that it's definitely something people need to consider and shouldn't just default to. It very much so depends on the industry. Like cyber people do not care if you have an MBA unless you're on the like sales or business side of cyber. And even then, it's like most of the people who end up being business owners in cyber don't have an MBA because they're the person that built the product or the system or the whatever that like started the company. And then additionally, and this is just my take after talking to enough people about it, I think that the MBA's biggest use today is going in person and getting access to the network.
Yes.
And like as an academy grad, that automatically becomes less valuable because we already had one. And then additionally, it's like it's really, really good for that. So you go in person, you get the internship, you leverage the network, you get a really cool job at McKinsey or Bain or BCG, or someone in your class has got some stellar startup idea and you end up working with them. Like that's the value of a business school, more so in my opinion than what you learn, because you can just look up someone's curriculum and then just go on YouTube and probably learn everything you need to know about a business degree. But that's just my opinion now after talking to a couple of people. I think that if someone wants to do it to educate themselves, it's valuable and they should go do it. But I don't think that it's like, it shouldn't be the default, especially if you're like, I want to learn how to do business. It's like, well, there's a lot of resources out there on how to do business. Then it doesn't require you to get an MBA. So
absolutely. Yeah. No, I think the connections, that piece is really key for the folks going in person, especially to your upper echelon schools, rubbing elbows with the next guy who creates the next Uber or whatever it is, like, or the guy whose dad, works for some company, whatever it is, like the connections are valuable. But to your point, the academy connections are so strong. I can say for like me personally too, like specifically, like our connections on the hockey community, we have like our own alumni community. So if I ever needed a job or something, like that would be the first place I would go. It wouldn't probably be my Nebraska MBA online classmates that I shared a group project with, right? So I almost think you're almost in two camps. You're in person for the pedigree and network, or you're like online to check the box, which is okay too. And actually, is going to get you in the door at certain jobs that are going to want you to have an MBA. So yeah, just caution to think and do a little bit of research on it for sure.
I completely agree. When you were deciding to get out of the military, did you have any like, I don't know, hesitancy when it comes to the transition just because of the job that you had? Like you had to work to apply to be an MSc. It's not a job that people just get. Like there is some level of credentialism that comes with it. And so did you have any issues with leaving that thing to start something else, or was that a pretty easy jump for you?
No, that was pretty easy for me, to be honest. Again, not that I didn't value it or like it. Actually, if I could do it over again, I'd do the exact same job. People are like, "Oh, you should have gone into finance." It's like, no, thanks. I don't want to work at the MPF or what. I know that's not all finance officers do, but it was actually a great Air Force job. Highly recommend it to anybody. It was awesome. Great work-life balance, transitions well. It is really just it's rewarding. It's a great job. But for me, like that didn't play into the decision at all. The process was, you definitely had to apply, right? It isn't just put the preference down in 1 through 6. It's not quite that easy, but it was just an application, and once you're in, it's just a job, so it didn't play in.
Yeah. So for you now, so in addition to your financial planning business, you also run the BLUF financial podcast, which I think is really awesome. I really enjoy watching your episodes. Talk me through what it was like starting that show.
Yeah. Great question. So podcast I always thought would be on my roadmap. I'm definitely a consumer of podcasts. I guess rolling back the clock, when I started my firm and started creating some content on LinkedIn, I started a blog, but kind of did some more soul searching and just said, like, how do I consume content? And it's reading books and podcasts. I don't read blogs. I try not to read too much on LinkedIn. I try not to be on social media all that much in general, honestly. So I'm more of like a longer, deeper form consumer. I'm a huge fan of Cal Newport. So like all his work on deep work, digital minimalism, all that. So anyways, podcasts, books, like I like that longer thought form of communication and digesting content. So I figured, like, why not get into that instead of making short posts or something, short, snappy LinkedIn or Instagram posts all the time. Let's make a long form piece of content that people can really get to know me. I can really flesh out some ideas, some thoughts, not only on the financial planning side and things that I do with clients, but like also have good conversations with folks, kind of a lot like these conversations, but typically financial focused on, what you're going through with your transition, or what you're going through when you started a business, like that kind of thing. That's kind of the idea of the podcast. But starting it, there's so many tools these days that you get on Riverside and you figure out a good microphone and some lighting, and you're up and running. So I did have a podcast launch company that did help me develop like an intro and outro and some of that stuff that I could never make, but it hasn't been too difficult, I think, to get off the ground.
That's awesome. What would you say has been one of the most interesting things that you've learned during your time running the podcast? Because what episode are you on now?
I think I've done 24.
Congratulations. You're over one of the difficult humps. I forget what the percentage is, but
what's
it's
the
like
first hump? Is it 10?
It's 2 actually, but then it's like 2, then it's somewhere in the teens, then it's 21, and then it's 52. Like, and I can't remember what the percentages are, but it's right now, if you make it past 21 episodes, you're in like single digit percentile of podcasts that have that runtime. So congrats, you did it.
Dude, I know you're past that. What are you on? Like 40, 30?
So I've recorded 52 episodes.
Wow.
46 of which have been released.
Amazing.
So, yep.
Amazing.
So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's been a wild ride. But yeah, so like what would you say has been one of your big takeaways from the podcast so far?
Yeah, for me, a couple of things. One would be, I guess, going back to like why I started it, the deeper form of communication. I'm amazed at how many people say they have like listened to it or enjoy it. I find those conversations and that to be a lot more rewarding than maybe like a like on a post, because it is, again, deeper. It means more. So like quality over quantity, I think is more important. And then I would also say just like learning about myself and what I like doing. These conversations are awesome. Speaking into a microphone is fun. Writing a blog post for me, I don't know. It's just not quite as fun. So I guess like I have learned that it helps me sharpen. It does a few things for me, right? It helps me sharpen my sword. So when I'm talking about a financial planning topic, like I'm getting better at it. I'm essentially teaching it. So learning deeper how to speak better about it. So it helps me be a better planner. Obviously helps me spread the word about my business. I've had prospects come through the door that say either they listened to the podcast or saw some LinkedIn post about it and want to talk. So I think that having a podcast, like, and they say this in the posts about, why podcasts are good. It makes you somewhat of an authority on topics. People, respect it. whether they listen to it or not, I think having a podcast is a valuable outlet. So for me, like at this point, it's figuring out what is that sustainable cadence of episodes, how long they are, like how many are guests. I'm still, to be honest, still fleshing all that out. You're much more dialed in than me, much more consistent. And I do have like obviously other things. I've got the business has been growing really well lately, so a lot of focus goes first there. I don't want to put clients and prospects on the back burner for going and chasing more marketing. So I don't believe in that. So it's figuring out what is that cadence for me, that makes sense for a sustainable future growth rate.
I think that's a good question to ask, and I think that the answer to that is going to be very dependent upon the person by person, and it's just something that you have to think about. But I mean, you're someone who clearly likes to take time to contemplate things, and so I'm sure you'll find the right answer for yourself very quickly, I'm sure. How, speaking of balance, how you said you don't like to be on social media a lot, so how do you balance promotion of your podcast and promotion of your business with staying off social media? Because I think for a lot of people, whether they're promoting a business, promoting a show, or just a veteran transition out of the military trying to leverage link to get a job, it tends to have this ability to like suck you in. And so how have you tried to balance like the necessity of being on the platform
Yeah.
without being sucked into the platform?
Yeah, great question. And I go back to Cal Newport for this one. His idea of digital minimalism is not to eliminate social media completely, although he does suggest you do that for 30 days to figure out what is necessary and what you actually need for like a positive purpose in your life or business. But put it in a box. So it doesn't need to be necessarily on your phone. You could maybe have like one day a week where you check it. That's what I've been trying to do lately, is have like one day a week where you're going to actually check it or engage or go connect with people, like whatever that activity is for you. I use like if I'm going to post about my podcast or do some other LinkedIn or Instagram post or something, I use Publer. I don't even know how you say it, where you schedule out the social media posts in advance. So a lot of times when those go live, I'm not even on there. So sometimes folks might comment and like I don't get back to them for a while because I'm not really trying not to really look at it. But I think you did make a good point that it can totally suck you in. Like I was posting 4 or 5 days a week, like engaging with a lot of others, like for a long time. We're talking months, and it drained my energy. Like again, going back to the introspection piece, I just like during holidays and stuff, or like I would get really strung out and I would take a break from LinkedIn or something for like a week or two, and I would just feel so much better. Like I would just feel so much better not being on it. I'm like, like I know I'm growing my business because like people are finding me through LinkedIn, like that's great, and I need to do that. But like at the same time, like I also need to feel good about it. So I don't know. I think it's putting it in that box. What is that, like 80-20 or even 90-10, right? That we can get 80% of the results with 20% of the effort. If it's once a week, if it's scheduling out your posts, and try not to have it again like on your phone so accessible. It can't be that like bored place you go to scroll. There's just, for me, there's so much more useful things you can do with your time and that I need to be doing. I'll also add that like when I was super engaged on LinkedIn, like I had a couple posts go like, for me, semi-viral. I don't even know, 100,000 impressions or something. I don't even know if that's good, but I didn't get a single client from those posts. Like not a single, not even a prospect. So like, I don't like, and I get them in other places, like not on social media or like weird. So it's like it doesn't directly correlate to good results necessarily for me. Just getting a bunch of impressions and likes, like so I don't. So for me, again, going back to like why the podcast is great. It's that longer form. I don't need 100,000 people to look at my podcast, right? I need like 200, and I need like 3 to reach out. Like that's the so the numbers for me, like I don't need to be this media sensation, and that's kind of been the focus in getting away from social media, putting it in its box where it definitely grows the business. I'm top of mind. I'm alive. I want to say that. I'm just like people know that I'm breathing and I'm still in business. That's like the goal for me.
Yeah. And it is, I also love the other thing that you highlighted, which is you're setting aside time to actually chew on and process these different topics. Like you become your ability to talk about and vocalize these different financial planning lessons or subjects becomes significantly better. And so it's almost a mental workout for you, in addition to being able to, like you said, let people know like, hey, I'm here, my business is doing well and all that stuff. So I completely agree. I think, and I love that you've been able to take what your define your value for the podcast and be able to put it in a place where that's good, versus trying to just be as big as possible for the sake of being big as possible, because that's what people want. And I think that that's a mature take, and I think that that's a good thing for people to hear, for sure. But the next piece that I really want to dive into now is you're a financial planner who has transitioned out of the military. What do you think are some of the biggest pitfalls that military members fall into or should try to avoid when it comes to financially preparing to leave the military?
Yeah, great question. And there's a lot of them, but I guess I'll just pick a few. So I guess one of the main ones and overarching ones would be like not understanding right. Everyone's so 99% of everyone's energy when they're transitioning is on job search, resume. How do I figure out how to get a job, network? Like you said, go on LinkedIn, spend hours a day. Nobody's really thinking about like, okay, what is the salary? And then like, what is the actual take home pay? And how does that compare to my take home pay now? Because taxes change. All of a sudden I might be moving states. Maybe I can't claim Texas as my state anymore. Like the whole time I'm in the military, like you can just pick a state with no tax and claim that. Right now we don't have BAH and BAS, like taking all these things into account. All the insurance, like probably need more life insurance. You're not going to have SGLI anymore. Something you need to, so that would be, I guess, dovetailing into another one. Try to do that before you transition and go down this VA claims route. Because a lot of times when we get into this last year, we start going to the doctor a little bit more. All of a sudden we go to the VSO. We put in our VA claim. We're claiming XYZ. And all of a sudden all this stuff's in our medical records. And I did a life insurance application because I got my insurance before I went to my VA claim. And they asked me on the application, like, have you ever claimed VA benefits? And I could truthfully answer no, because at the time I hadn't. So that's one I would say is key to do like earlier rather than later. But again, going back to like the income difference, I think that's a big one. And then just like introspection about like, what's the life you actually want to live? A lot of people getting out are going to have pension, maybe even disability income. They're going to be able to have some decisions to make about how much they really need to make or work. I think a lot of folks, especially like the high achieving E7, E8, E9, 05 and above types, they're making good money in the military. They're important. They want to get out and think that they have to be important in the civilian world and make all this money and work all these hours. And it's, I guess, do some thinking about like, and some math about what is enough for me and my family. Like, what do I actually have to go work a job, or can I figure something out that pays me some money, but maybe I don't have to work 40 hours a week? So that whole income conversation, how much do I really need to make instead of just going job chasing, includes some math, but also some qualitative sides. And then I would also say just like great time to like take a look at your state documents. If you don't have them, obviously get those in place. But when you're getting out, things are changing. You're changing states sometimes. Probably another really good time to update those. Especially if you have kids, super important to be naming the guardian of your children if something happens to you in your will. But yeah, so those are the big ones. But your income, your insurance situation, your estate documents, certainly like your investment, sure, all that's always important. But those are, I guess, those would be the biggest ones during your transition.
I think that those are all really good. I think the insurance one, my wife and I, so my wife's still in, so we have yet to have to really have a insurance conversation until she gets out. But I think that the life insurance call out is fantastic. Like that's something that no one talks about. And so I think that that's a really good thing to consider in terms of making, like, I don't know. Have you had a deal? I don't know if you can't talk about it with your clients, that's totally fine. Have you had a client who's had to really take a step back from the 40-hour work week? Like, and the reason why I ask is I feel like so many people in the military are just like go, 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 go. I mean, even you said, like, back when you were at school, you had this wild schedule. You felt like you had to maintain that wild schedule when you started working in the military. And so I think for a lot of people, like, tuning back that 40-hour work week is really hard. So have you ever had to deal with people who are like, you're like, hey, you really don't have to work that much to, because I feel like people don't think about that at all. So
Yeah.
what?
No, I haven't successfully had that conversation with a client yet. There's probably a couple that I need to push, but I have had the conversation, the along similar lines of retirement savings, and hey, like, you can get the bigger house that you've been eyeing. Like, it's okay. Like, you're in your mid 30s, and if you didn't contribute another dollar, you're going to be wealthy in retirement. Like, you've done such a good job for your first 10 years of working. So let's go get the bigger house and sleep well about it. So I've had kind of that conversation more so with those super savers, but definitely I think the dialing back the work week, that conversation will become more prevalent, I think, as especially now as we're working, asynchronously, and we're working in remote environments. Not everybody in a 40-hour work week in an office. I think it's more realistic, even in the company setting, to dial back to less than 40 hours. But some people aren't going to have that, luxury. Like, a lot of companies, they don't hire people for 20-hour a week jobs. They're like, you either work or you don't. But definitely for that's certainly possible. Again, another certainly possible for the business owner, and more doable.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And for people who are getting out, I feel like a lot of veterans, we have like an innate desire to serve and to help people. And I feel like if people do enough digging, a lot of folks default to, I'm going to start my own business. From a financial planning perspective, are there any thoughts or factors to consider when it comes to starting a business versus being an employee in
Mm-hmm.
your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So one thing I didn't mention when you asked me what was important during transition, kind of the foundation of that kind of whole project of transition, is cash flow analysis. So what are we bringing in and what are we spending on a monthly basis, like from that 6 month out to like 6 months settled almost would be, because that things are going to change, expenses are going to change. We already talked about how take home income's going to change, because that there might be a huge excess of money there or a huge deficit. And we got to figure out how to plug those gaps. So I guess going into that business, do I start a business conversation? You need to think about your personal financial situation. Like, not everybody's really in the position to start a business. I'll just use myself as an example. I started a business in 2019. Oh, I guess 2020, late 2020. Okay, 2021. My wife and I, we weren't married yet. We were engaged, but no kids, no debt. I think we were both renting at the time. Like we're maxing out our TSPs. Like no overhead, right? So like we're me starting this business in a career field that it doesn't have massive startup costs. Like, sure, I've got expenses, but it's not like I'm buying a building and I'm buying supply, and like it's a service business that's virtual, and I do it from home. So not crazy startup costs, so that helps. But then, like, I guess, like, looking at the success rate of businesses, I think that's important. So, like, again, for me, in the field that I was going into, XY Planning Network is a network of advisors a network that helps advisors early on, fee only advisors like myself, like help them from 0 to 3 years really get their feet off the ground. I'm still a member of it. I think it's excellent. But anyways, they put out a lot of benchmarking studies about how long it takes to actually grow to like a livable income and make a profit and all that. And they really say it takes like 3 or 4 years. Like, if you can sustain 3 or 4 years of losses and not really taking an income, you can make it. So, I looked at my timeline. I'm like, well, I'm in 2021. We'll have an income till at least 2025 because my wife's got a service commitment. So I've got 4 years. Like I'm just gonna put my head down and do this thing. So I had a good background in terms of what we had done financially so far. I had the data to confidently say, hey, I think this thing can work. So I think with those two pieces, like I had enough to go do that thing, and it has worked, and I have been able to more than replace my income now. But I guess going back to like that business planning, it does start with, all right, we need some serious liquidity. Like how long is this going to take to turn a profit? How much is this going to take on a monthly basis? You need to take a look at, can we cut our expenses? Can we tap other sources of liquidity? Like, is a HELOC an option? Is maybe taking a TSP loan, 401k loan an option? Taking a distribution from their IRA? I hear planners in my business that are totally successful now, but they're like, yeah, I took all of my money out of retirement, like 6 figures, and started my financial planning business to fund those first 3 years. And they're like, it's the best decision I ever made. They're like, I have the life I want. This is amazing. But like, it's easy to say that looking back, and how many people did that and didn't make it? I don't know. So that's where you got to think about the personal risk. Like, okay, if this doesn't work, what's my fallback? And again, for me, that was, okay, I could just stay in the military, or okay, I'll just go get a job in hospital administration. It wasn't detrimental to my financial future because I wasn't, cashing out my retirement. I had really properly balanced the risk portion of that equation. So it all comes down to, I guess, long story short, liquidity, income and expenses, and your personal risk, and kind of how much you've done so far. I think starting a business at 22, much more risky, I guess, because you're probably not that stable than starting one at 35 or 40 when you've got, 500K in a 401k.
No, that makes a lot of sense. The one thing that I want to ask you about, going off of what you just said, and also just teeing off of a couple of other comments that you made so far in this episode, is you've approached a lot of your life up until this point with a lot of thoughtfulness. And what advice would you give people to be thoughtful in their large decisions? Because I think a lot of folks are just like fire from the hip, like quick draw decision making. And how did you get to a point where you're able to evaluate these decisions with the level of thoughtfulness that you have? Or is everything that you're telling me kind of like, this is what I've learned after not doing that?
No, good question. I would say obviously read books. That would be huge proponent of that. Read anything, something you're interested in. It can even be fiction. I don't read a lot of fiction. My wife says I need to read more, but read books and honestly, the best advice I could give is spend a lot of time in silence. I think like we have so much noise from social media. Like we've already bashed on that, but even at work, like in the military, like this guy's talking about what he's doing with his retirement, and this guy's talking about putting in for the Q3 awards package and why that's important and why you need the strat, and like you need to go do this. Yeah, hey, and this guy's talking about going to the reserves because like everybody should do it, right? We can have a whole conversation on that too. I'm not going in the reserves, but spend some time like with silence. I've just found like even now for me, contemplating business decisions. How often do I do the podcast? How big do I want my firm to grow? Do I ever want to hire someone? I'm not really sure. But for me, it's spending time legitimately just like contemplating those things, just in pure silence, like for minutes, sometimes many minutes, even up to like an hour on end. Like just sit there and think. Take a walk and think. Don't put your headphones in. Just think. And I think more answers will come to you than you ever thought. I think silence is super powerful. I've been reading a lot of books around the power of silence recently, and I've just found, I don't know, I found it's been super helpful for me. Like I'm a huge podcast guy, right? I already said that, love to read. But like lately I've been like just trying to put the podcast out of my ears sometimes and listen to less and spend more time in thought. So I don't know, that's been super helpful for me.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome piece of advice, and one that I think everyone would definitely benefit from, because I think people just clog their brains up with so much noise. They never take the time to sort through and process anything that they actually heard. What Going into reading though, what resources would you recommend that people, obviously besides the BLUF financial podcast, what do you think that people should be looking to consume to become smarter in financial planning, but also like what other resources have you consumed that have really benefited you recently that you want to highlight?
You're saying like specific podcasts or books or
Podcasts, books, people, your call. Whatever comes to mind.
yeah, super interesting. So like for me, people wise, Cal Newport, I mentioned him. I would consume everything he has to say about productivity, deep work. He's releasing a new book called Slow Productivity. I already pre-ordered it. Can't wait to read it. He's been big for me. Carl Richards is another one in the financial planning world. And then Morgan Housel. So he wrote The Psychology of Money, which was a bestseller, just released another book, things that I forget, always the same. I forget the name of it, but he's really thoughtful in the personal financial space as well, and kind of like matching up your money with your values and good behavior and all that. So those are three people for me. Specific books, like I would say like I'm just pulling up my Goodreads. If anyone wants to follow me on Goodreads, please feel free. That's where I track my reading. A couple specific books like that have been super impactful for me. Your Money or Your Life. I just reread that by Vicki Robin. Super good takes on like understanding that like money is basically that book is like money is life energy just stored up. So if we're going to go work for money, we just need to like make the connection in our brain that we're just spending life energy to do so. And then on that line, another really good one is Die with Zero. I think that came out last year. So that's a really good one about talking like most people's goal should not be to die with like millions and millions of dollars. Most people should be aiming to like work and attain the wealth that they need to live the life they want, and that's it. So it kind of goes along the same lines of like don't work endlessly. And then let's see, I used to have a top list somewhere. Those are I guess I'll stop there. Those are two huge ones for me in terms of life and money. Yeah, off the top of my head, you stumped me. I wish I had better recommendations.
No, it's good. We'll include your Goodreads link down in the description of the video. So if people want to go plumb the depths of your reading list, they can. So then
Please
and then
do.
you don't have
Please
to
do.
worry
I'm
about it.
always
Yeah.
open for recommendations. I add stuff to my Amazon cart like every day. So if anyone knows any good
fantastic.
books, please tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably gonna go I'll probably add the two that you just mentioned to my card after this. So that's sweet. So one of the next question that I want to ask you is, what would you say is one of the biggest financial planning myths that you want to bust? Like, what's something that really like people believe that you're just like, that's not true?
Yeah, great question. There's, I guess, the biggest one in the investment world would be that selecting stocks or individual investments or trying to beat or time the market is at all possible for really anybody, any individual. Because there's just you open up Wall Street Journal today or any day or any news, and it's always talking about like, oh, these are, you go on a Market Watch, it's like these are the top 5 stocks this year or last year, and you go to Morningstar and it like has these are the 5-star funds, and like all that is such garbage. It is what they put to sell ads so that they get eyeballs on their papers. Like it has nothing to do with reality. Like most folks should be ignoring all of that, sticking with a disciplined investment plan and going and living their life. You shouldn't be spending very much time at all on your investments. So I guess that's the biggest thing that like I wish I could get through to more people. I don't know. Like I see folks just making mistakes. You see the whole crypto run up with folks, that are throwing some serious dollars into these cryptocurrencies or these exchanges or like Celsius, like the whatever they were doing, the bank. I don't even know that I can call them a bank. And they're, I know some guys that have lost some money there. So I don't know. I would just say like, if seems to be too good to be true. It probably is. Good investment and good wealth building as an overarching principle should be boring and slow and take a really long time. It shouldn't be overnight. It shouldn't be quick unless you're the next, you invent the next Microsoft, Amazon, like that's sure.
I mean,
that's
even then, that took
even then
a
years,
while.
decades.
That took a long
Right,
time.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So like, and that's a lot of intellectual and human capital that goes into that. So nothing's quick. There's no like crazy secrets. I guess I'll say that too. Like if someone says they have some secret thing that only the wealthy are using, so like not to dovetail into another thing I like to bash, but some permanent life insurance strategies that are peddled on LinkedIn and TikTok, and only the wealthy and athletes and real estate agents use this, and it's like, if you hear that, that's a red flag. Don't. It should be simple.
Don't do that.
Building wealth should be simple, boring, and take a really long time.
Yep. That makes sense. Sweet, man. I think that's honestly, I think that's great advice. That's great advice to end on. Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Billy. This was a blast. Thank you for having me on. Would love to do it anytime. And I got a couple more book recommendations now that I found my better list.
Hit me with it.
Okay, Essentialism. I read that 3 times. So the disciplined pursuit of less. So it's kind of like minimalism, but anyways, it's like the 80-20 rule. Also a great book. Just talks about pursuing less in your life, but more a few things with much more depth. Let's see, Psychology of Money. So that's Morgan Housel. That should be like required reading. Yeah, and Atomic Habits, James Clear, also a great one.
Great book. I love Atomic Habits. Yep. That's a fantastic.
James Clear is
one.
awesome.
Definitely.
He's another great person to follow.
Yep. Yeah. Fantastic author. Great book. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for the book recommendations. And if people want to find you, where should they go?
Yeah. So I guess social media wise, like I'm on LinkedIn sometimes. That would be like the best one to find me there. And then happy to chat anytime there. And then baskinfp.com is just my firm website. So those are probably two best places.
Okay. Awesome. Well, all those will be in the description below. So if anyone is interested in reaching out to Eric to ask him more questions, if you need financial planning, definitely head over there to talk to him. But that's the end of the episode. Eric, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. And to everyone who's out there, thank you so much for making it to the end of the episode. You all are the reason why we do this. We love that you're on this journey with us, and can't wait to hear from y'all out there in the big world. But that's the end of the episode, and we will catch you on the next episode of the Post Military Podcast. Peace.